So, I mean, now we're moving into a conversation about cultural appropriations, and that's
I
a
know,
whole.
but I'm just,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, like, maybe everyone can't pass on, or their skin color, but do we, in some ways, when we don't even recognize it or think about it, we withhold certain things of ourselves that we feel like will fit into, you know what I'm saying? Like, we know that it's going to frame. My friend and I were having a conversation about whether or not, the whole new thing of corporate America is having your picture on your attached to your emails, like when you send out your emails. And we had to have a conversation, should she or shouldn't she put her picture up there? Because once they know you're black, are these things, because they work from home in a lot of remote offices, would that change their interactions, their thinking, etc.? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
And I think it's like those type of things that white people don't have to worry about. They don't have to think about, and we have to think about. The other day there's a project I've been working on at work, and I'm frustrated, right? I can explode when it comes to this project.
Your eyes just exploded.
Yes, it's been really, cooking my grits, this project, right? And I always throw that out there.
Please note, I haven't heard that phrase from a woman under 40 ever.
And I am under 40. And so we're on this call, and my white counterpart goes on this rant. I mean, he goes off, and he says everything that I have been wanting to say and feeling in my heart. And so I'm happy because somebody's saying it.
You turn your camera off, you're like,
yeah, right? So I'm happy that somebody's saying it because it needed to be said. But then I'm sitting here literally, because this is me now, this is the space that I'm always in. And I'm it really sucks that I couldn't say that. Because I feel like if I said it, obviously it would have been received differently.
Yep.
One, and the funny part is I was also thinking maybe I could have said it, but I don't know because I'm too scared based off of, previous situations and how it's happened to other people.
You have evidence.
I have evidence that says
dangerous.
that I have to sit up here and hold my tongue, and this dude can say everything that I've been thinking freely, and I don't have that freedom.
You don't have that freedom. And so it's interesting because I've recently turned that corner.
Mm-hmm. The ethic corner?
Not quite the ethic corner. Maybe it's the intersection.
I need your Access Hollywood checks before I can turn the ethic corner. Once I get them checks, I'm turning the corner.
I never got paid for Access Hollywood.
Cut the check.
They don't pay for experts.
But they will pay for a novice?
That was dope. And so I have turned that corner. It may not be the ethic corner, but it's like the intersection of ethic and something else. I got to figure out what the cross street is. I have found that I have fallen into this niche of expertise where I do get this privilege of being what I see myself as to being my authentic black self. I've been at my 9 to 5 for almost a decade now, and I'm at the top of the space, and it's a great space, and it's a multicultural college, and so everybody's all about that. But even early in my career there, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. When I ran foster care systems, a small portion of foster care systems for LA County Department of Mental Health, and I would watch how all of the disproportionality with all the black kids aging out of the system, meaning not getting adopted before 18 or 21 now. And now I am training workers at DCFS, right? This is like a 13-year time difference. And in my small business, I get to sit in front of these multi-millionaires, these white dudes who are running major companies, like significant companies, and I get to tell them about privilege and about the reasons why there are no black women in their C-suites, and have these conversations. And there is a catharsis about it, in that I've had to live so much of my life tempering my passion because I know it's going to be translated as aggression.
Yep.
And now I feel like I've been placed into a position Well, I don't have to do too much teetering and tottering. My son is going to a new middle school, going to middle school from elementary school. I've been interviewing at all these schools, and if you're any way familiar with Los Angeles private schools, there's a hashtag going around called Black at. And so Black at this private school, that private school, that private school. And so we're looking at the hashtags to see how these black kids are experiencing all these private schools. And it's astounding because there's so many things going on. And we know the injuries that we are placing in men. We said, this is the type of, we want them in a private school. We know that they're primarily white environments. But we also need to pick one where our black ass family can walk in as black as we are. And we're able to find that. And there are other schools where we're kind of like, what do we have to hide when we walk in here? We got the address, we got the cars, we got the blah, blah, blah. But what happens when you're sitting down at dinner or you're at a play date?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? And so, those factors about blackness are just so big and so real. I just really want all black people to work on whatever it means for you as an individual to work on defining your blackness for yourself. Outkast said, and I don't use the N-word, but I'm using it to quote Outkast. You can bleep it out if we need to. Is every nigga with dreads for the cause? Is every nigga with gold for the pause? No, so don't get caught up in appearance. Aquemini, another black experience. And I'm out. I didn't need to get that last 2 bars, but I did.
So, and another thing that I learned or have encountered is the part of the black community's physical health that ties into our mental health.
And white supremacy.
And white supremacy. And even our thinking of things about physical health ties into, I remember someone say, you weigh yourself every week? That's what white people do. It's like down to like we would be surprised that, and it might be what white people do, but however, white people are also, not having hypertension and a lot of the things that we have. It's also what
people who try to lead a healthy lifestyle might do too.
So how is our physical health? One of my issues with the physical health aspect is I feel like if we aren't, we should be gearing up for a war. And whatever that war might be, mental, or spiritual, emotional, financial, etc. But I think that we miss the importance of our physical well-being needed to supplement the mental, spiritual, emotional, financial parts of the war. Whether that is, even just taking a walk and how that, clears your mind.
You got to be alive to fight the war.
And you have to be alive. And I just think that, are we paying attention to our physical health? Are we getting, the food correct? Are we getting the I can't think of it, what we release when we exercise?
Cortisol.
That helps put us in a better mood or help.
So the cortisol is the stress hormone that we release. You're talking about the dopamine.
The dopamine
that builds up in us.
Yep. Or just even helping release the tension and stress of the things that we're encountering. How can we be better on our physical health side?
There's two pieces to that. There's this great book that's usually used inside therapeutic training, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And The Body Keeps the Score talks about how we experience stress, and even if we don't cognitively recognize or don't bring cognitive awareness to it, our body keeps the score. And so Black people and people of other intersectional identities oftentimes exist at this threshold of stress that's just higher than other people, right? And so, I talk about like when my son may be hanging with friends and he has to get a receipt whenever he's in a store. Like if there are Barnes and Nobles and you buy something, you get a receipt. And the white dads are like, well, why does he have to get a receipt? Because I say, if anything goes down, he's going to be the one who's going to be identified. And so when you think about how we move through the world and these additional layers of stress that Black people experience, they're just natural to us, unfortunately. And as a result, when I make a statement like that, I'm not cognitively aware that the cortisol pumping through my body has increased because that's a stressful experience. Yeah. It's just because it's a natural experience. It's a regular experience. When I'm jogging down the street and people cross away from me and I can't wear a hat and neon sign that says, hey, I'm not dangerous, I'm Dr. Grant. Like, I still get the same stereotype as everybody else. That creates stress. And we don't recognize it, but our bodies do. And our body systems are being impacted by that. Now you add to that the communities in which we're disproportionately living in, where there is a higher percentage of alcohol and tobacco availability, and then there are gaps in yoga studios and fitness studios and CrossFits, if you will. I don't know if you say CrossFits, but whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And then you fill that in with the food deserts where there's only fried chicken. I know we're talking about fried chicken, but there's only fried chicken and there's only fast food. We have to first acknowledge that there are deliberate efforts placed inside of many of our spaces that limit our ability or access to wellness. And so that's the first thing. And what that means is that we now have to work extra hard to get it. For years, Black people weren't allowed in public swimming pools. And they say, oh, Black people don't swim. That's because when Black kids went to the swimming pool, they were like beaten. And we have to figure out a way to build this deliberate cadence towards wellness, physical wellness and mental wellness, but also understanding the impact. I think we also minimize these things because we don't always name them. Like, excuse me, diabetes in the Black community has always been sugar. Like, I don't think I knew the word diabetes until I was an adult because my great grandma had sugar. And when her sugar was acting up, they gave her some sugar. Like, get Mama Versi a cup of orange juice, give her a mint.
Right, yeah.
And we weren't calling it that, right? Back in the day, like, you know, Uncle Joe had a nervous breakdown. It's like, no, Uncle Joe had bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the things we're not naming, which allows us to not see the gravity of them. And so I think as Black folk, as we begin to get more information, like Black suicide, we don't talk about enough. As we begin to get information and start talking about these things, I think the knowledge increases. But, you know, we also need more Black hospitals in our communities and clinics and clinicians who are trained to work specifically with Black people and brown people. I work at Pacific Oaks College in Pasadena. They have an MFT program that specifically trains mental health clinicians on how to work with Black people. Mm. They meet all the licensing requirements, but it's the African American Family Studies program. They have the Latinx Family Studies program because they said, we're going to graduate clinicians who have cultural empathy, who can go into a home and look at this structure that may look very different from their own, but not judge these needs based on this Eurocentric model of what wellness is. And that's what we got to start doing. We literally have to start paying attention to the efforts that have been placed to hold us back and be honest about them and say, okay, I'm going to fight against this. It's harder for me to get up and go to the gym because I've been told that if I'm not playing basketball, I'm not exercising. And so what if I just went out and ran? Oh, Black people don't run. It's like, yes, we do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just getting past those hurdles are critical because we're dying.
Yeah.
Heart disease, diabetes, substance abuse.
Yeah. I want to also make sure we're very clear about what is mental health. Because I think that people align mental health with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or, you know, all of these very clinical names. And I could be wrong. This is why I called in the expert. But I feel like it is a range of things that it can be. So what exactly is mental health? Just so we're very clear of what we're speaking about.
Yes. When we talk about what mental health is, people do oftentimes talk about mental illness. And that's another problem with all this framework is that we talk about illness too much and we talk about dis-ease or disease. We need to refocus to ease. Like, what is not just mental health, But what is mental wellness? And how do we facilitate wellness? So mental health, as you said earlier, exists on this whole continuum, right? From people who are experiencing distress, but distress is not always a bad thing. Distress builds resilience. And those are important factors. Even trauma has the ability to build something. We always talk about post-traumatic stress, but there's also a concept called post-traumatic growth. Okay. That's when you realize a skill or a strength or a talent that you would have never known existed had you not experienced the trauma. And so when you ask the question of how do we define mental health, we have to begin talking about it from a more strength-based perspective, because if it's always dark and gloomy, if it's always schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and suicide, although we have to talk about those things, if it's only that, we won't engage in the whole conversation, which is also, okay, I'm moderate, but how do I get happy? I'm neutral, but how do I become happy? And so a few years ago, this whole new discipline of psychology arrived, maybe about 20 years ago, called positive psychology. And positive psychology is not about being Pollyannic. It's about saying that our ecology is riddled with a certain amount of risk factors and protective factors. Yeah. How do you as an individual capitalize upon the protective factors inherent in you to drive you to success? Like, how do you use certain characteristics that allow you to build healthy practices and build a more solid sense of self? But we're so focused oftentimes on the deficits model that we need to move to the strengths model. And for me, that's what mental wellness and mental health is. Even though we still have to talk about suicide, we have to talk about depression, we have to talk about anxiety, but we also have to talk about resilience. We also have to talk about happiness and wellness, because so many of us are convinced that neutrality is where we have to live. Yeah. I mean, certainly everything ain't gonna be happy all the time. Right, yeah. But so many of us deny ourselves an opportunity to seek happiness because we're conditioned to think that neutral is the space that's the best you'll get. You better just be happy where you are. Like, my dad worked the same job all of his life and until he retired. And now he's retired and he's chilling or whatever. But I think about that and I said, I think he was neutral. I think he wanted more, wanted something else, not more, just something else maybe. Maybe he didn't. But when I think about it, there's so many things that keep me in a particular place that I say, oh, just be happy with what you got. You're good. You're good. Don't rock the boat. Don't try to do too much, because you're going to lose that neutral. And once you lose neutral, you go backwards. And so why risk going forward to potentially go backwards when you can float? Yeah. We have to build evidence and cadence towards happiness and saying, I'm going to risk that little bit more, even though all the evidence in the world tells me that ain't for you. You've never seen a woman of color vice president, Miss Little Lady. You can't go into politics, little brown girl. Yeah. Now look, we got Vice President Kamala Harris there, right? And now suddenly this little brown girl can say, there's a tick of evidence that I can take. President Obama, a tick of evidence I can take. And people get to now maybe move into those spaces, but it has to be deliberate. Yeah. Everything has to be deliberate. That was my word for 2020. I didn't pick a word for 2021.
I think mine is, I'm going to make one up right now.
Do it.
Because I hadn't before, but I think I'm just going to go for it. That's not a word. So mine is a phrase, which is going to be go for it. I put up on my Instagram last night on my story, it was a thing that said, I wonder where I would be if I would stop stopping. You know what I mean? Profound. Right. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm just gonna even with these episodes, I wish you could see when I post these episodes, this is me. And I just hit send because it's I'm terrified but it's just you know what? Just do it. And then whatever it is gonna be, it's gonna be and that's been my whole my new approach.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your son and the spaces that he's trying to travel, and on your Instagram you have put a video of you giving the talk to your son, the talk, which everyone knows about.
Yeah,
but I'm actually bringing that up to wonder, is that what led you into writing a book? Because you just wrote and published a book.
I did.
A Moon for Us All.
A Moon for Us All. Thank you for that. It is. It really is. You know, and we mentioned this earlier about those of us who are Black parents having that struggle. I would hear, you know, Black moms and dads historically talk about for their daughters having to travel miles to find Black dolls for them. And, you know, I had that problem finding literature where my son saw himself in. And so I wanted to create that. And I created it for two reasons. One, because Black kids need to see themselves more in literature and in books and so on and so forth. But white kids also need to see themselves not centered in books and in literature, because as we're talking about, and in fact I wrote a part of that in the dedication of the book, that this book is dedicated to blah, 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 but also to anti-racist parents who are looking to make sure that their kids are no longer given the lies of them being the center of the world. And so I wanted...
I wish like I had a little DJ right there. Like that's where I need that right there.
Well, your producer gonna drop it in.
Right.
We have, again, a deliberateness. We have to be deliberate. I'm not the person necessarily. I will go to a march. I will do a protest. I will do a boycott. And so I know everybody gets to identify how they participate. For me, it's writing. Writing and reviewing. So I do a lot of script reviews for movie and TV script reviews. I help people not green book their shit. I write my own creative projects, and I'm working on a film project right now that I'm trying to create. And this book that I wrote is a book that I wanted families to be able to read and see themselves in. And so what I wanted to do was to write a story about Black history, but not like a teachy story. And so, for instance, in the book where you learn about Emmett Till, it's because Grandpa lived down the street from Emmett Till when this happened, and he's telling the story. And so the little boy in the story, or the 8th grade boy in the story, has to do this project during this spring break trip to learn about his ancestors and how they contributed to who he is today. And I just felt like I wasn't able to find that story in children's literature, and my contribution to the world. You know, my first book was a study on Black men in the United States, Canada, France, and the UK. This was a children's book. I want to publish a book every other year.
Oh, okay.
And to me, that's my contribution to the space, are these new kind of efforts at describing what's happening, or adding a tool where somebody can say, okay, I'm so afraid to dig into this, but there's this great children's book that we can read as a family, and it'll be our dialogue prompts for us to have these conversations. Because I'm about doing what I need to do to make it such that my son, when he applies for his first job out of college, that the world has changed so significantly. That's a little Pollyannic. I'll take that part out. That the world has changed to a degree where he can bring his whole self to that interview, whatever it is. He may not be able to bring his whole self to that job, but that when he sits down, he feels safe enough to be who he is. And for me, that's what I want to contribute. You know, people need to march. We wouldn't be where we are right now if the millions of people didn't get out there and march.
Yeah. But I think you said it best, because I think that's what we have to. Like in my previous episode with Jill, she had asked me like, what's making me, and I actually, after that episode aired, I felt like I didn't do a good job of articulating, but you said really what I feel and what I was thinking. Like, you know, yeah, I can go to a march, you know, but I'm not an eloquent Tamika Mallory or who like that's not me, and I'm not I'm not a soldier on the front line, and we need all of these different things.
All of them.
So where can I help, and where what feels comfortable, or what can I do? You know what, I need laundry detergent, so why not get it from True Laundry Detergent, Black-owned company in Atlanta? You know what I mean? And now I've grown into this, and I really like it. I was giggling like, I'm like this hub now of Black business. Like, people are really hitting me up.
You are the Black business hub. It's kind of like, I need some insoles produced by Black people. Holler at Angela.
Right. And I'm I don't know, but I'm going to find it. But I like, because at least, it's growing a conversation. And I think, too, because, like, then the more positive experiences people have, then the more they do it. And we need that, because one of the reasons why, and this is a whole nother thing when you come back again. I always tell people, we cannot win a war right now because we don't own anything. We don't have any money. Like, and you need money. We don't own food. Like, all they have to do is cut off your food and weapon supply, and you've lost the war, right? So, like, if we can start making it where we are building our communities and building, becoming less dependent on everyone else and more dependent on each other, and even in spaces where they might own the space, but at least when we find our piece that we can occupy,
we need infrastructure.
That's a whole nother.
We need infrastructure.
A whole nother speech. But
I would love to figure out, like, I don't know, and I'm gonna Google this right after we finish. I don't know the percentage of Black farmers in America, for instance. Like, you're talking about food supply. I know there is a contingent of Black farmers, but my imagination tells me it's 3% of all farmers are Black.
Yeah.
Given our history, like, why are we not dominating the agricultural space, right? Yeah. And so when you talk about getting, as we used to say in the hood, getting to the plug, like, we need to start finding more opportunities where we're the plugs. Yeah. I did this conversation not long ago with venture capitalists, a room full of millionaire white people. And they were talking about social entrepreneurship. And I did a conversation about cannabis and social entrepreneurship. And all these people were investing in the cannabis industry. And I was explaining to them, I said, as a part of dismantling structural racism, you need to understand that for most Black and brown men who are involved in the penal system, most of their initial crimes was like a dime bag of weed when they were 16.
Yep.
And I said, if you really want to make a move and do something different and unique in this space, for every $1 million you put in, you need to have a job attached to it that's given to somebody who has a criminal record. You need to make sure that everything that you do is connected to breaking these systems. And, when we talk about, well, what is my role in doing this? I want to participate, but I don't know what it is. I can't go to the march because it's COVID, or I can't do this. Like, there are so many ways. I was so proud. I was working with this financial organization up north in Oakland, white firm, very wealthy firm, and they told me, I didn't even give them this idea, that I was their diversity consultant. They were getting a new book that they were going to read as a group, and they said, now we decided we still have our Amazon account, but when we buy books for the whole company, we use this Black book club, this Black bookstore called Marcus Books in Oakland. I was like, oh my God, what a great idea. And I didn't even give it to them. And so there are people, to your point, who are identifying what they can do that looks differently, right? You gotta eat. Why not commit to, every third meal that you eat, making it a Black or brown or person of color or female or LGBTQ plus owned organization? Like, you got to do it. So why not? Yeah. I read a statistic recently. The Black dollar stays in the Black community for about 6 hours.
Yep. And what was the Jewish community? It was like weeks or something, right? It was like
6 months.
Yeah.
But again, we talk about intergenerational trauma. I feel like I could cut out a 3-mile radius of a circle around Fairfax and Beverly and drop it in the middle of the ocean. And for those of you who don't know, Fairfax and Beverly is a stereotypically Jewish community, and it would thrive.
Yep.
I used to live over there. there are Jewish grocery stores, Jewish banks, Jewish schools, Jewish everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a result of that Holocaust experience that we were talking about, that if they did not build up that infrastructure in that space, they would have died.
Yeah.
Now, we know that Jewish people get to experience skin privilege and get to oscillate between being white and Jewish as they please. I'm not saying that all Jewish people do that, but they get skin privilege. And so people oftentimes ask, well, if the Jewish people experience that trauma and the black people experience that trauma, why is it that the Jewish people are thriving? Point one is skin privilege. Point two is that and this is not a racism Olympics. I'm not trying to this is worse than that. Point two is that every generation of black person not only contends with the historical trauma that they experience, they get a contemporary trauma that juxtaposes itself to the historical trauma. And so I have this one slide that I utilize sometimes, and I have 3 generations of black men. It's grandpa, dad, and the kid. And over grandpa, I have the picture of Emmett Till come up from 1955. Yeah. And then under dad, I have the picture of Rodney King come up in 1992. And under the kid, I have the picture of George Floyd come up in 2020, just so we can understand that even though there's immigration trauma, there is Holocaust trauma, the black experience is unique in that there remains state-sanctioned trauma for black people. And you said something earlier about the trauma porn, how this is a thing. The American Psychological Association had to call the news broadcasting stations to say, you guys need to slow down on all the times you're re-showing the George Floyd murder. It is traumatizing people.
Yes.
People are literally seeing their children and their fathers in that man's face. You got to cease and desist. And so, it's just so tough when we think about anti-black racism and the nuances associated with it. Of course, there's racism of all kinds, but anti-black racism is the most fatal, thereby creating a dangerous environment.
I'm going to actually step into your waters, and I'm going to add a point 3.
Please.
Take my degree off the wall.
No.
But I also think because we've been cut off from our true culture and heritage, when I watch the hikers, I get so emotional. 1, because it's emotional.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. But 2, because I know we had that and it is taken from us and now we don't have it. And I get very upset because I wish that we had it. And so I think a lot of, to your point, a thing about the Jewish community is they still have their heritage culture to kind of, latch on to. And we don't have it as much, even when it comes down to for Black History Month, my church wears, the African
kente cloth and everything. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress up. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And it shouldn't feel that way.
It shouldn't.
But it does, because I feel like we're very disconnected. And and then once
that was purposeful.
And it was purposeful, exactly. So I think a lot of, even though other cultures they have, like we said, this isn't the race Olympics, but I think they still have a thread that leads them to their original heritage that we do not have.
And we've been told not to.
And we've been told not to. So we're so cut off. We're cut off from our past in such a way that we're grasping sometimes at straws. And I think that plays a bit on our mental health.
Huge.
For sure.
Huge. We've been given a narrative about the continent of Africa that is serving to create this separation.
Yeah.
Africans have been given a narrative about African Americans that have served to create this division. And we know that Marcus Garvey was very early on in the Pan-Africanism movement to make sure that this division didn't exist, but the movement wasn't as strong as white supremacy. And so as a result, there's this gap. And what has happened is that not just white Americans, Black Americans, all Americans, believe that African American history begins at 1619. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean? Just think about this. What does it mean if you ground a people's personhood in their bondage? 1619 is when we arrived here.
Right.
Every other culture, to your point, gets a thread in a historical context that gives them agency across time. Meaning that even if you are Jewish and you talk about the Holocaust and that historical context, there's still all these other factors that you're navigating, whether it's the religion and cultural aspects of Judaism. But because we start our story at 1619, we don't get that thread of continuity that that you're talking about, because we're written out of all those spaces. I mean, you know, the Bibles that they used to enslave people had 200 some odd verses eliminated because they didn't want enslaved people reading about liberation and education and powerfulness. They took those verses out of the Bible.
And also the picture of Jesus, which is completely different than his description in the Bible.
Come on. Hair like wool, eyes like fire. Again, we're talking about this deliberate effort.
It's so ingrained.
It's so purposeful.
It's almost genius. You can't deny
the
genius behind it. But it's
genius.
It's insane.
It is genius.
Okay.
It is purposeful.
So I'm gonna switch to wrap this up.
All right.
But you are gonna have to come back because we literally can do this for 800 years. We play this game. Pick a plate.
Okay.
So you can do either these black cards are, going to appeal to your psychological side and your mental health and your well-being.
The black cards do that.
Yes.
Okay.
The yellow cards are cultural karaoke, and I thought when you draw, you can talk, you can just give a reference. You might want to rap it.
Okay.
When you did your Outkast lyrics from before, I thought you were gonna say, like that one Outkast song, "Don't Pull Your Thing Out Unless You Plan to Bang." I didn't, but so you can reference.
Outkast is my favorite hip hop group.
As they should
Just
be.
FYI.
Which one?
Can I pull one from each?
Do I
get two pulls? Okay.
There's no oppression here. You can do whatever you want to do in this space.
She say there's no oppression here till the editors get a hold of this, and then I'm all oppressed in the editing, right? I'm
true
joking.
That. Very true.
So I'm gonna pull one of these first because this seems like the funner deck.
Yes.
And then I'm gonna go
well,
there.
Well, depends on your definition of fun, but yes.
It's true. All right. Let's see. Do I need any instructions?
They will give you.
Okay. Missy Elliott perform a song by or featuring the legend Missy Elliott.
You don't have to think that hard.
Is it worth it? Let me work it. Put my hand down like in a verse. It's I don't even know if that was ever really a real word. But
it was. She literally is reversed.
Is it reversed?
It is reversed for real. To circle back to what you said, Black excellence is its own reward.
Black excellence is its own reward. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to talk to me. We'll see you next time.